This video covers the IGCSE Biology Objective 6.1.5e on the 2025 CAIE syllabus to outline the use and storage of the carbohydrate nectar. So before we get to that, let's just talk about the other components in this diagram that we've been looking at. So we've looked at respiration, cellulose, starch, and sucrose. So let's quickly take a look at the amino acids that form proteins, fats and oils, and the nucleic acids. So the components of glucose are used to build amino acids, which will then make proteins in combination with nitrates from the soil. So if you look at the diagram of the amino acid, which you should recognize from biological molecules, you can see that there is a carboxyl group that contains carbons, oxygens, and hydrogens. And so that component is going to come from the glucose molecule that plants make through photosynthesis. Now, the diagram on the bottom that has the different seeds and nuts, that is how plants are going to use glucose in the form of fats and oils. So it's the seeds and the nuts that contain the fat and oil molecules in plants. And since both carbohydrates and fats contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, it's easy to convert one to the other. And then finally, we have nucleic acids. Now, nucleic acids are going to form DNA molecules, and DNA molecules are found in the nucleus of every cell in the organism. And so one of the components of the DNA molecule is a sugar. And so the glucose molecule is going to be able to provide the chemical components for that 5-carbon sugar that forms part of the structure of the sides of the DNA molecule, which you are already familiar with since we covered that in biological molecules in a previous unit. So now let's take a look at how glucose is used in the formation of nectar. So first of all, what is nectar? So nectar is a watery solution that's produced by flowers. When we study plant reproduction, we will learn more about the nectar. You can see it here in the bottom picture. It's made up of fructose, glucose, and sucrose with some trace amounts of some other components like proteins and salts and acids and oils. Basically, the sugar content, or the glucose and sucrose and fructose of a particular species of plant will vary from species to species. Typically, there are structures called nectaries near or adjacent to the ovary in a flower, and the ovary is typically found at the base of the flower structure. And the nectaries are the structures that are going to produce this nectar. So you can see in the top picture the structure of the flower and where the nectaries probably would be positioned. And again, in the bottom one, you can see the nectar that has been produced. So they've basically done a cross-section of the flower for you to see the nectar that's produced down at the base, almost below the ovary of this particular flower, whatever it is. Now, let's not forget that the nectar is very important to the plant because it's going to attract pollinators to come and pollinate the plant in order for it to reproduce and create the next generation of members of their species. So what is nectar actually used for? Now, you probably already know this, but there are sex cells in flowering plants. They're called gametes. The male gametes is the pollen, and it really can't move on its own. So it's going to rely on pollinators to transfer the pollen from the male structure to the female structure of a flower of the same species, whether it's the same exact flower or another flower on the same plant or another flower on another plant of the same species. It doesn't matter. All of that is pollination. So really, the pollinators have to do this. Whether the pollen sticks to their legs or sticks to their body, it doesn't matter. But really, the nectar is going to provide a reward or an attraction to the particular insect or animal, because sometimes we have bats and sometimes we have birds that are pollinators. And so the pollen is there for the animal to feed on, and by doing so, they become the transporter, or pollinator as we call them, of the pollen without actually realizing it. So the animals feed on this nectar, which is sugary, and that sugar comes from the production of glucose in photosynthesis.